Hello, my name is Daniel Yuck. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate you, your time, and your support. In today's video, I want to share with you some top lining mistakes that beginners tend to make, and I'm also going to share with you how we can go about resolving these mistakes to go ahead and better our workflow. By the end of this video, you will be able to click away with better knowledge as to how you can go about bettering your lining on your end. However, should you have any questions at all, I encourage you to drop a comment down below. Rest assured, I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I will be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do also have social medias under the same name as this YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, all under Daniel Yuck. I would appreciate the support over there as well. With that being said, let's get right on into this. Let's go over some top lining mistakes that beginners make. One of the top mistakes that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is the needle depth is off. Whether they're going too light into the skin or too deep, it's never really precise and in between where we need it, which is the dermis. It's always in the epidermis or the hypodermis, which are the two layers that we want to stay away from. When we go too light in the skin and we deposit ink too light, we're going to experience fallout, which means inconsistent healing results. The tattoo may fall out altogether depending on the placement of the body. Not only that, when we go too light, the tattoo is also going to go with like a faded look right out the door. We're never going to accomplish full saturation is what that means. So right off the bat, going too light, there are a lot of negative adversities that we would not want to experience. And the same thing when we go too deep. Going too deep is kind of going to be the exact opposite. We're going to experience heavy blowouts, which means ink is going to leak under the skin. It's going to give it like a sort of bruised effect. So we don't want that. It's going to be more pain and trauma for the client. Along with going too deep, we tend to experience scarring and textured tattoos, raised skin. These are all side effects that we want to stay away from and adversities that we don't want when our tattoos heal. Not only that, the integrity is also compromised over the years. The ink is going to keep blurring and bleeding into each other. So if it's a detailed tattoo, you kind of get the idea. There's not going to be any sort of integral structure throughout the years to keep it from kind of blending and blurring and becoming a blob throughout the years. So those are some negative side effects from going too deep. We always want to get a keen sense, or at the very least work and develop into a keen sense as to where the dermis is, because that's where we want to deposit the ink. That's where the ink should live. I'm going to share with you some ways that we can go about resolving these issues that I'm listing here, so be sure to stick around until the end. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is their hand speed may be too fast or their hand speed may be too slow. Again, there's never really an in-between, a fine-tuned balance. It's always one or the other. When we go too fast, then we tend to experience inconsistencies. We may be causing more trauma and pain to the client, but not only that, the work that we do, we can risk compromising the quality, especially if we have like a rushful pace throughout the application process, which means from A to B we're rushing it and we're kind of wobbling along the way. We want to stay away from those adversities. So moving too fast can cause a bunch of different side effects, much like needle depth, that we don't want. We want to stay away from that. So moving too fast, that's kind of the results from that. Moving too slow, much like needle depth, is the exact opposite. If we move too slow, this is where the exact same things come into play. We could be oversaturating a certain area. We could be causing more damage to the skin than we needed to. We could be providing more ink to a specific spot, which means, again, over the years, the integrity is going to be compromised. If it's a detailed tattoo, it's going to kind of blur and bleed into each other. So that's another side effect of moving too slow. On top of that, we could experience scarring, textured tattoos. You get the idea. So those are some adversities from going too slow with our hand speed. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is their voltage may be too high or their voltage may be too low. And again, much like the hand speed here and the needle depth, this variable is also going to cause very similar adversities. If our voltage is too high, that means our needle is going to be making more rounds per minute than we needed, which means it's going to be chewing through the skin that many more times the needle goes through the skin. So over the years, when it heals, again, we may be experiencing textured healing, scarring, raised skin, even design integrity it may be compromised over the years just because we deposited more ink into that area because of those higher rounds per minute. So running the voltage too high can definitely be a bad thing. I also have seen where tattoo machines are kind of just screaming really loud. Even short pin style tattoo machines, I've seen where people use them at 8 and 9 volts. To each their own. I feel like if you have a workflow down, then it works for you. However, to begin with, I would recommend staying on the lower end of a voltage range, which I'm going to get into more here. Some adversities for a lower voltage would be the rounds per minute are not going to be as much as a voltage running higher. So what that means is that if we were still moving at a similar pace as we would with a higher voltage range, then we're going to get inconsistent lines. They're going to have a sort of faded look because the ink is not depositing. We're not giving the needle enough time to make its round to deposit the ink in a clean and consistent manner. So that's going to be a negative side effect from having our voltage too low. So you can kind of get the idea of the adversities that we experience when running our voltage too high and too low. I'll go ahead and show you how to adjust and resolve these issues here in a moment. So be sure to stick around with me. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is having uncomfortable posture and positions throughout their process. So what that means is when a tattoo artist is tattooing, they're more so prioritizing I guess whatever they feel is necessary as opposed to their posture and positioning. So therefore, when they're applying their tattoo, they may not be fully committed or ready to commit to the line. Therefore, they may be experiencing less than desirable results. So I kind of feel too throughout the, especially at the beginning phases throughout tattooing, we kind of really undermine the power of our postures and positions when applying a tattoo. We're going to notice that when we start focusing on our comfortability when applying a tattoo throughout our journey, we're going to get better and better, and our tattoos will get cleaner and cleaner. So that's another top mistake I feel that beginners make when it comes to lining. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is bad needle angle. So when we are applying a tattoo, depending on the needle size or needle configuration that we are using would determine how we are going to approach the technical application. So oftentimes when we are just starting out, that's not something that we can be mindful of because we just may not know. So therefore, in the beginning phases, we will tend to kind of approach a tattoo however we see fit, which is oftentimes not the correct way to approach it. So therefore, leading to results such as bad needle angle. That's another top mistake that I've seen beginners run into when it comes to lining. Some adversities that can come about from bad needle angle is the line weight may fluctuate. So let's say if we're going for a thinner line weight and we need to stay true to that integrity, if our angle is off, then it's going to deposit the ink in a manner that shows up different than we wanted. So that's just one adversity that comes about from bad needle angle. We could be causing more trauma to the skin as well as more pain to the client. But again, that's another top mistake that I've seen beginners make. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is starting with a smaller needle size. When we start with smaller needle configurations and we're not equipped or have any experience at all as to finding needle depth or adjusting our needle angle, then we're going to be more prone to causing damage and trauma to the skin. Even if it is fake skin, then we're going to be more prone to cutting it up. For example, here is an Inkclaw bug pen 3-round liner. This right here is a really fine needle. So let's say this was the first needle that I chose to practice with. This was the first needle that I ever used. This wouldn't be ideal because I'm going to be slicing through the fake skin. We have to know how to use such a small needle configuration. Now, I've seen this happen time and time again. When beginners are first starting out, I don't really recommend using a 3-round liner until we understand and grasp the concept as to how to apply how to apply lines with, for example, an 11-round liner. Here is a Quill 00 11-round liner. This is a tighter 11-round liner. However, it's not thin enough to cause damage and it's not thick enough to where we have to change our angle and adjust in an advanced way. This is a good needle to start off with. So this right here would be a great candidate to start. And if I'm correct, an 11-round liner was the first size needle that I ever used. That can be, I think it was like a 9 or 11, but I did start in that range. And I do feel like it is a healthy range to start in, especially if it's your first time picking up a tattoo machine. So this right here, we can see our line weight a little bit more, and we're not going to be so inclined to kind of slice and cut through the skin because the needles aren't that fine as the bug pen 3-round liner. So you can kind of get the idea. That right there is a common mistake that I've seen beginners make when they're first starting. So again, try to begin with a medium line weight such as an 11-round liner. Once you get the idea of how to apply lines and you start doing it each and every time, you can kind of begin to branch off to heavier round shaders and even thinner line weights such as a bug pen 3-round liner. Another top mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining is selecting the wrong line weights for the design at hand. So oftentimes when we're just starting out, this isn't a common variable that we even consider. So therefore, this kind of goes unnoticed throughout each and every tattoo that we do, maybe for the first 50 to 100 tattoos. We do start gradually improving in terms of selecting needles for specific designs. So if you're not fully comfortable with that process yet, I encourage you to kind of be patient with it and you will grow into it. It does just take a lot of practice. Oftentimes, some adversities that we're going to experience when selecting wrong line weights is over time on human skin, the integrity could be compromised. And not only that, the design itself, let's say for example, if I were to select a heavier line weight for this design, this tail right here is going to read a lot different as opposed to staying true to the line weight. So we do get some design changes and fluctuations, which is what we don't want. Let's say for example, if a client agreed on this specific design, they obviously agreed to the lines and everything as well and the weights of those lines. So therefore we wouldn't want to fluctuate and apply this tattoo with, for example, an 18 round shader, because we're going to get tremendously bolder lines, which is not what we want. This variable is often overlooked in the earlier stages of our tattooing journey. So therefore I felt like it was also important to list here wrong line weight selection. And another mistake that I've seen beginners make when it comes to lining, and this one's not really so much on the common end, but it is something that I've come across, is using the wrong tattoo ink. So let's say for example, if we're using a tattoo ink that is a bit on the thicker end, therefore we're not going to be able to accomplish the results that we want, especially if we're doing designs that require a lot of detail, fine lines. For example, let's say if we're going to be doing a dainty tattoo that has a lot of fine lines in it and heavy detail, and we're using, for example, Intense Super Black, which is a very thick ink, which is more so for packing black, then the results may vary. However, I'm not saying that it's not impossible. You can use specific inks. However, inks are made for specific applications. So let's say if you're going to be wanting to line, then you may want to lean more towards an ink that's designated for lining to help with your white process, to help with the application process, just to make the workflow a lot smoother. Let's say you're going to be doing designs that are just dominantly shading and no lining, then you may want to pick a healthy pre-made gray wash of your choice. You get the idea. This is also another variable that we often don't think of when we first start, but it is something that we would want to consider early on. Those right there are some top lining mistakes that I've seen beginners make along the way. Feel free to screenshot this so that way you can reference it later on should you choose to do so. Please forgive my handwriting as well. Allow me to touch base on the tattoo notes area, and then we can get into the technical application as to how we can go about fixing and resolving these issues here if we're experiencing them. Now, from here, I'm going to pay attention to the design that I'm doing. So I see that I'm doing a Mew Pokemon tattoo that's actually a really small design. Off the bat, I'm not going to use any sort of heavier line weight. I'm not going to be using an 11 round liner, 14 round shader. I'm going to stay away from heavier line weights. Naturally, I'm gravitating maybe towards something along the lines of a 5 round liner, maybe even a standard 3 round liner, just because standard pins are a little bit thicker, each pin providing me with a little bit heavier of a line weight. So I do feel like a 005 round liner or a standard 3 round liner would be good for this design and for my specific technical application and abilities. Now, these are things that I'm going to consider, and that's basically what these notes are here. So you can see this note says it's a fine line dainty Pokemon design, so I've acknowledged that. It requires a smaller needle size. I've also acknowledged that. I'm going to run at a lower voltage simply because I'm going to be using a smaller line weight. On top of that, running at a lower voltage allows me to move slower, which minimizes mistakes that I should or may make along the way. Another thing that I'm going to be doing is prioritizing my comfort. So each and every time I commit to the line, I'm going to make sure that I'm comfortable with the motion and flow that I'm going to be making before I apply the line for the best results. Not only that, I'm also going to be focusing on using the correct line weight so that way I could get the design and capture the design's integrity true to this specific stencil design. Now, another thing that I'm also going to consider is my accuracy with my ink deposit, and each and every time I commit to a line, I'm always going to identify my point A and B, which allows me to kind of map out and plan the tattoo each and every step of the way. This right here is the logic and thought process. These are basically the fundamental rules that I'm going to be following to apply this tattoo right here. And keep in mind, we're focused on lining specific for this video. I want to talk about 7 here, the wrong line weight selection. So when it comes to selecting a line weight for this design, this is going to be where we start in terms of resolving our issues. So you can see that I have a side that's listed as unhealthy line weights and I have a side that's listed as healthy line weights. When it comes to selecting a line weight, this is something that we're going to grow and develop into. At the beginning, it isn't something that we consider, as I've mentioned. So we can see right here these unhealthy line weights, and I would consider these unhealthy because they're not I feel, again, this is all opinion based, not the appropriate configuration or sizing for this specific design. We have to remember, if a client agrees on this design, they were obviously drawn to probably the dainty lines, they were probably drawn to the Pokemon itself. So therefore, we would have to consider that when we apply it. We can't agree to this design and then use, for example, a 14 round shader to apply these lines, because the client's going to end up with a really thick, heavy line weighted Mew, which isn't what they saw within the design. So that right there can be a big discrepancy, and that can kind of be a make or break for most clients. We want to stay true to the design that they agree on. So therefore, you can see here is an OG Produce standard 5 round shader. This one's falling on the thicker end as well, and it kind of overpowers these line weights by nature. And you're going to notice a good way to figure that out is if I were to put this line weight right here, you can see that it is tremendously thicker than the line weight beneath it. So therefore, this right here off the bat is not a good needle to apply this tattoo. That is going to apply for all of these. So for example, here is a standard 9 round shader. It's still too heavy for those lines. Even a Quill 0011 round liner, I would say this is still a little bit heavier for this specific design, and that's going to apply for all of these. You can see that next to it's a TNT standard 9 round liner. Same thing, a little bit on the heavier end. We have a 13 round shader and an Inkclaw 88 round shader. All of those are unhealthy for this specific design. With all of these needles, we're not going to be able to capture the integrity and details of the eyes, which is something that we have to consider. I'm going to need a very, very fine needle for those eyes right there, especially to apply them and capture the integrity. So that's also something very important to me. More than likely for the eye area, I'm going to be using, for example, this Inkclaw bug pin 3 round liner, simply because I can be real precise and accurate with where I'm depositing ink. You can see that I have a quadrant 3 round liner long taper. This also seems like a pretty good candidate to apply the outline. Right here I have a Big Wasp. This is going to be a 003 round liner long taper. This one also seems like a pretty good needle to apply the entire design. I also have a WJX right here, another Big Wasp. These are both 005 round liners. I feel like these would be great to apply the outline. And then for the eyes, we can use a Bug Pin 3 round liner from Inkclaw. I feel like that would be a healthy approach. If we take a look, for example, the WJX 005 round liner, that's about the ballpark of where I want the line weights for this entire Mew right here. And I do feel like we would capture the integrity of the dainty lines using this specific line weight. So therefore, I'm probably going to use this 5 round liner for the entire outline. When it comes to the eyes, again, I'm going to use the Bug Pin 3 round liner from Inkclaw just to stay true to the integrity. The only reason why I'm not using the Bug Pin 3 round liner for the outline is because I feel like I would have to kind of sculpt the lines up a little bit more, just because of how fine this needle is, as opposed to the 005 round liner where I'm going to approach it with a one pass approach. So that right there is my artistic preference. That's the logic thought process that I'm using to figure out the line weights that I'm going to be selecting to apply this tattoo. Let's get into number 8 here, and I want to share some information on how we can go about approaching and resolving this, and then we can get into the rest here. So when it comes to tattoo ink, selecting the correct tattoo ink for the design and process and application at hand is really important. You can see, for example, I not only have a very small Mew Pokemon tattoo, it's also a dainty fine line design, and that's something that I have to take into consideration before I even take needle to skin. This is something that I'm going to consider when I'm setting up and picking out the gear that I'm going to be using. I'm also going to be thinking about those line weights and the ink that I'm going to be using. So for example, I want to get an ink that's more so designated for lining, such as Intense Formula 23, or even Dynamic Black works well, and even, for example, Mummy Triple Black. These inks would work well for applying a design like this. Every manufacturer is a little bit different. So for example, this Triple Black may not be as heavy and thicker as, let's say, for example, Intense Super Black. The reason why we want to be mindful of the inks that we choose to select and use is because they do all heal differently, and inks are made for specific purposes. Some inks are made for blacking out, while others are made for shading, and others are made for lining. So you might want to find one that best suits your wants and needs as the artist. So for this demonstration right here, I'm going to be using Dynamic Black tattooing ink to apply this outline. I like Dynamic, and again, I also like the Mummy Triple Black. Those work well for lining. This is going to be fully subjective effective. Whatever lining ink you choose to use, feel free to use on your end. If you're unsure where to start, you may want to check out the Dynamic Black or the Mummy Triple Black, in which I will be leaving my Amazon affiliate links and other affiliate links for you in the description below to the gear featured in this video. Selecting the correct ink for the design at hand is very important. Let's say, for example, if I was using Intense Super Black to apply this design and this was on human skin, then over time I may compromise the integrity of, for example, the tail area, just because there's more pigment within thicker tattoo inks. Therefore, over time it may spread a little bit more, which could possibly blur the design in this area. So maybe an example, for example, in 5 years time, this curved tail area would have been blended together, the eye area would have been blotched and blobbed. And the idea is, behind that sort of approach, using a thicker tattoo ink, we're going to lose the integrity over the years, as opposed to using an ink that it doesn't have as much pigment in it and it is a little bit more equipped for lining and that spreads a little less over time, giving the tattoo more time on the skin to read nicely, true to the integrity that it started with. When it comes to lining, another important variable to consider, and not really a mistake, but it's more so something that we would want to consider along the way, is the stroke that we are using. The rule of thumb is, you can see, for example, this has a 4.2 stroke all the way down to a 2.4. So the higher the stroke, the harder the hit. The lower the stroke, the softer the hit. So when it comes to lining, I like to use a 4.2 stroke simply because it packs and has a harder hit, which means I can be in and out. This is also something that you want to consider. If you have a heavier hand, then you may want to use a softer stroke. If you are comfortable and developed well enough to know how, or to be accurate, then you can use whatever stroke you'd like. For this demonstration, I'm going to be sticking with the 4.2 stroke. This is the Emalla Grand tattoo machine, and I'm going to be doing the WJX 5-round liner to apply this entire outline, along with the Inkclaw bug pin 3-round liner to apply the eyes. That's how I'm going to go about tattooing this. I feel artistically this is what makes sense. Now, this may fluctuate from artist to artist, so you may pick a different setup, you may use a different stroke, you may use a different machine altogether, maybe even a coil. You get the idea. The idea is, though, be comfortable with the gear that you're selecting and know why you're making the choices that you're making along the way, each and every step of the way. Let's get into needle depth and let's figure out some ways that we can resolve some issues here, whether we're going too shallow or too deep. When it comes to needle depth, one thing that I'm very mindful of is not only how deep I'm going into the skin, but how much my needle is out my cartridge. So you can see right here, this is how much I'm going to be hanging my needle out for this demonstration. There is reasoning behind my choice here to hang my needle out this far, is because I want to be able to see my needle tip each and every step of the way, which also allows me to experience minimal pulling. It's not always guaranteed to not experience pulling. However, sticking out my needle a little bit more like so allows me to have a cleaner workflow. When we just start out, we're more tempted to kind of ride the tube, which would be a little something like this, where we have our needle kind of tucked in this much, and then we're going to rely on the side of the tubing to help keep us straight, to help prevent blowouts and traumatizing the skin. Now, I don't recommend riding the tube. This is going to cause more of an issue than anything. We may even experience stencil loss, because when we do this, the ink is going to blob all in this area. And it's also going to be very hard to see your needle tip, which could result in lines that aren't true to their line weight or even true to the stencil there. So I have seen that a lot. You don't want to ride the tube. You want to try to focus and go straight to hanging out your needle to a healthy length, and try to develop a sense of feel to where you can float the needle in the correct layer of the skin that you need and apply the line each and every step of the way, each and every time. This is going to be a far better approach to learn, as opposed to riding the tube, especially earlier on. Riding the tube could also lead to a lot of bad habits that we don't want. Now, that's more of needle adjustment there than it would be on needle depth. When it comes to needle depth, that's going to be essentially how deep we're going into the skin. A great way that we can know that we're in the correct layer of the skin is to listen for a specific sizzle and to feel for a specific vibration. Now, I know that kind of sounds funny, but when we break the skin open, we do tend to hear that. When we're in the right layer of the skin, we do hear that. So that's what we want to listen for. But also, more importantly, when we're in the right layer of the skin, not only do we have an audible sound that lets us know, we also have a feel, a specific bog and vibration within the machine that lets us know we're now into the dermis. So allow me to kind of demonstrate that real time here, and I'm going to do as best I can to get that point across. I do also have other videos that are full in depth on needle depth, and I'll go ahead and card those up for you above so that way you can check those out, or you can just head over to my YouTube channel video section, type in needle depth, and you see all the videos pop up. So when it comes to a specific design, I always start from the bottom on up. Now from here, what I'm going to do is identify my point A and B, which goes back to the notes I showed you earlier. And then I'm going to feel for that specific vibration and sound, which sounds like that. You can hear a specific like sort of bog, maybe even kind of like a sizzle. And you can see when I dab away, we have a nice, clean, solid, consistent line. Let me see if I can put the mic a little closer to give you a better sound. So let's try this again here. Same thing. I'm going to identify my A point and B. So you can hear that we've broken the skin open. Has a sort of sizzle-like sound. I can feel the bog and vibration in the machine change when I enter the dermis. And I'm going to make my way over as cleanly as I can, like so. Keeping my hand speed voltage aligned along with my needle depth. But that right there is one way that I know I'm at the correct depth, is when I hear that sort of like sizzle sound, which is a breaking of the skin, and when I feel that bog and vibration, which is also the breaking penetration of the skin, depositing the ink. So these two combinations of sound and feel allow me to deposit ink in a manner, and they really do help me know that I'm in the correct layer. So I do feel like those are important. Just to recap, you want to listen for that sound and you want to feel for that vibration. Now, when it comes to incorrect needle depth, allow me to kind of demonstrate both here. Allow me to demonstrate too light, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate too deep here. And again, this is full in depth in my other videos as well. Identify my point A and B. Too light would look something like this. Especially if I'm trying to go for a permanent tattoo. You can see when I wipe away, I'm left with very little to no ink left behind. You can't even see that there's actual pigment there. That right there is what too light looks like. Now, too deep is gonna look the exact opposite. So too deep would look like this. Let me see if I can actually blow this skin out here. You can hear it. I can feel the bog and vibration. And not only that, the line weights on this side are heavier than over here. So these are clear indications that we are going too deep. When the sound changes, it sounds abnormal. When we're being a little bit more forceful as well, we can know these are just clear indications that the application may be too light or too deep. If I look in the back here, you can see that we just about blew that area out right there, while the others you can barely faintly see them, which means they're sitting in a more healthier layer of the skin than these right here. You can also see the visual difference between here. You can see that this line weight is tremendously thicker than these, and you can also see even on the fake skin it gives a sort of bruised impression. The exact same thing is going to happen on human skin as well, along with trauma, textures, more pain for the client. So you can kind of see the idea between going too shallow and too deep. Neither of them are healthy. We want to develop a healthy workflow and develop into knowing where the dermis is and how to reach it each and every time. And the way to do that is to feel for that sound and to feel that bog and vibration like this. So taper in. Hear that little sizzle. I feel the bog in the machine. I'm going to bring it around like so. And then the same thing right here for these little details. Even though it's smaller little detailed lines, I'm still going to feel for that vibration of the breaking open of the skin, and I'm still going to listen for that bog on each and every detail. Each and every time the needle goes to the skin, I'm going to listen for those like so. And then I'm going to repeat that process throughout the entire design until I've reached the end. But that right there is how you can go about finding needle depth. Just listen for those vibrations and feel for the bog when you're tattooing, and then get comfortable with identifying that each and every time you create a line. Let's get into hand speed and voltage now. So when it comes to hand speed and voltage, let me show you what a healthy hand speed to voltage looks like and the results, and then I'll demonstrate the unhealthy way to go about it. So for example, I'm going to use this area right here. I'll use this little leg area to demonstrate healthy hand speed to voltage. Right now I'm running at 5 volts simply because I'm using a smaller needle configuration. Running at 5 volts means I have to move a little bit slower to allow the needle enough time to do its job correctly. I'm going to start right here and then I'm going to come around this way. I'm going to taper in, and you can see that before I move on to the next part, the area behind the needle is fully saturated. That right there is a good sign of a clean application all the way through. And you can even see it as well in my hand speed and voltage that it does look healthy. The application was successful. The line is nice, clean, consistent, and saturated. So that right there is what it would look like for a healthy to hand speed voltage. Let me show you too fast of hand speed, and then let me demonstrate too slow. So too fast of hand speed would look very similar to this. If we were to go right here, and then I'm just simply moving like so. Keep in mind, I'm running at 5 volts. Even if I were to go to a deeper needle depth, you can see though, still moving too fast left me with results that look a little bit faded. Not necessarily inconsistent, but we don't have any sort of saturation going on or anything like that. So therefore, it kind of leaves a sort of question mark when looking at the design. I do feel like we see this a lot. Like for example, if you ever see a tattoo that just kind of looks faded, even when it's freshly done, it's probably because they were moving a little bit too fast. Therefore, the pigment wasn't able to deposit enough to reach a saturated manner or a saturated state. So you can see moving too fast is a direct result of inconsistency. You can see that this doesn't really fit in with the neighboring lines. Moving too slow is the exact opposite. So I'm running at 5 volts. Moving too slow is just going to chew up the skin, and it looks like this. So obviously something's wrong with this for my current voltage and technical application. Now what's happening is I may be chewing through the skin. Not only that, I'm depositing more ink in these areas than I wanted, which means this specific area is going to be tremendously thicker over the years than the other areas just because of how much more pigment was deposited into these areas. Let's see if we risk a blowout. Although not fully, you can still see that that is a little bit deeper than the other lines that we're applying. So therefore, it did kind of chew away a little bit more than it would have with a healthier hand speed. But you can see this right there is a direct result of moving too slow. Either or, neither of them are correct. We always want to, again, find that balance. Now, a good way that we can go about exercising to find that sort of a balance and approach would be to simply keep working on it and go through it. So identify A. I'm going to work my way to B like so. There we go. And then you just kind of want to make the mistake. So move too fast and see what that feels like. Now, and then look at the results. Oh, okay, so I do see that it is a little bit lighter. What if I slow it down? So you kind of want to go through this thought process and go through these experiences on your own. So that way you can figure out the motions and how the needles behave, and that way you can start developing a sense of what's right and wrong for you as the tattoo artist and for your technical application. So when it comes to hand speed and voltage, there's really no way around it but through it. Just exercise and practice your lines. Make sure you identify A to B, and then just try to get the cleanest, smoothest lines that you can get. And over time, you're going to see gradual improvement, and you will start seeing your hand speed aligned to your voltage in a more professional manner. Another fun one, let's talk about voltage being too high. So at this point, this entire design I've been demonstrating just running at 5 volts. You can hear 5 volts. Let's say I take my voltage up to around 8 volts. So let's go to 8 volts. I kind of feel like it's a bit unnecessary for me to be using 8 volts with a needle configuration this fine. Now, let's say if I haven't really found out how to adjust my hand speed or my voltage and I'm running this high, then I'm going to risk more injury, pain, and trauma to the client's skin, and I'm just going to get unpredictable healing results. This is right here, I feel abnormal for my specific workflow. So let's say if I were running at a higher voltage and moving fast, then you can see I have to move fast and I'm more prone to making these mistakes. All of a sudden it becomes harder for me to actually follow the stencil accurately. I feel pressured more than anything to complete this line just because of how high this voltage is. Not only that, if I move too fast, you're going to see I'm still getting the same faded, inconsistent results. If I move too slow, I'm getting very negative results because the needle is just going through the skin too many times for it to be a healthy application. On the back, we may have blown it out or got very close to, as you can see. So that was deposited a little bit more deeper than I wanted with this higher 8 volts. Keep in mind, at a higher voltage, the needle again is making more rounds per minute, which means it's going to be depositing more ink in those specific areas, which could compromise the integrity of the design. So that right there is exactly what it looks like to move too slow or too fast with too high of a voltage. Same thing with too low of a voltage. It's going to be the exact opposite. Let's say if I'm going to be running at 4 volts, for example. When I run at 4 volts, we're going to get the same adversity. So let's say if I run at 4 volts, and I'm just going to kind of speed through this here, you're going to notice that I not only get inconsistencies with my saturation, the line weight also tends to fluctuate just because the needle doesn't have enough time to hit the skin and deposit in a consistent manner. So you can see running too low and moving my hand speed too fast is still going to cause a bunch of adversities. You want to adjust to each and every, or you want to learn how to adjust to each and every voltage you should use to get the same consistent saturated results. So you can see running at 4 volts, I slow my hand down a bit to compensate and let my needle make its rounds to cleanly apply the design. I come around this way and this way like so. So you can see once I start adjusting, I get far cleaner results right here. Now that right there is a direct side effect of inaccurate voltage. Whether it's too high or too low, we're going to be experiencing similar inconsistent results. A good healthy voltage, I guess, to begin is really hard to say, but if I had to give a ballpark of a voltage to begin, I would say start at around 6 volts. Now, if you're using, let's say, for example, 14 round shader, 18 round shader, I think 6 volts is a great place to start. If you feel like you need more voltage, and you can hire it up to about 7. Now, if you're using smaller needle configurations like a 3 round liner, 5 round liner, then you may want to start at 5 volts and then kind of work your way around to a more comfortable voltage that you feel benefits your wants and needs as the artist. The rule of thumb is the heavier the line weight, you can go up in voltage a little bit more. The smaller the line weight, the lower the voltage you want to have. Let's get into uncomfortable positions and postures here, and then we can kind of get into bad angles. From here, I've also seen where we don't really prioritize our positions or postures or comfortability. So what that means is, for example, let's say if I have to apply this area right here, that means like I'm gonna kind of have my hands like this and try to work like this. Therefore, I'm kind of prioritizing the design more than I am my comfortability, as opposed to, let's say if I turn my hands a little bit more this way, and I open this a little bit more like this, I have a bit more of a cleaner workflow to apply this part of the design. So you can see I'm taking initiative to give myself a cleaner, easier workflow here. You can see that I'm prioritizing my comfort, my posture, and my positions to apply the tattoo the best that I can. So I'm just simply going to adjust and then commit to the line by identifying my A, running at 5 volts. I want to keep at a consistent hand speed to voltage ratio, and then I'm just going to make my way around. When I get uncomfortable, I can simply taper out and continue, and then I'm going to repeat that again. As you can see, I'm going to start from this side, taper in, and then we're going to make our way around this way like so, and then taper out, and then from here I can kind of just taper into this line, bring it around. So you can see each and every step of the way, I'm adjusting my posture, my position, and my comfortability to apply this to the best of my ability. If I feel like there's any inconsistencies in any areas, I can just simply go back over it like so, and then I'm going to apply that approach each and every step of the way, which is going to provide me with better, cleaner, smoother results. So you always want to make sure that you're really mindful of your posture, your positions, and your comfortability. If you're comfortable, chances of you being able to apply that area clean and correctly are slim to none. So for this area, I would recommend kind of just moving around and finding different positions that benefit motions that are comfortable for you. So if you feel better bringing the machine in towards you, do, move yourself and posturize yourself in a way that you can kind of move the machine in a more consistent manner towards you. Same thing, if you're comfortable pulling away, then position yourself in a manner that's more comfortable for you to do so. You get the idea. So it really just takes a little bit of time and figuring out, trial and error, figuring out what you like, what you don't. Bad needle angle, and this one right here I feel is one of the most common and the last that I have to correct, or that I have to share with you here. So when it comes to bad needle angle, I feel like it's pretty obvious. So for example, bad needle angle can range like from this way. Bad needle angle can kind of look like this. The reason why it would be considered a bad needle angle is because if I were to deposit this line right here, I'm going to get the whole side of the needle, and we may notice a tremendously different line weight fluctuation from this area versus the rest, which we do. So you can see that the ink was deposited in a slant manner, and you can see that even right here looks a little bit blown out because of that. So off the bat, some inconsistencies that we're going to get from bad needle angle are inconsistent line weight and potential texturized tattoo healing, scarring, and blowouts. Now, that's just one of the many ways that we can angle our needle in a bad position that really doesn't benefit us. There's multiple ways that can happen. For example, if I were to go ahead and try to tattoo like this with the needle going this way, although it may not be fully wrong to some tattoo artists, but for my specific workflow, that's not normally how I create my lines. Although that line doesn't necessarily look bad, it's not a motion that I would naturally make. So therefore, for me, this would be considered more of a bad angle. I would prefer to approach my angling a little bit more direct, to where the needles hit direct on, so that way I can get the true line weight from the needle like this. So you can see I'm going to taper in, and then I'm just going to bring my line weight around, and you can see that the line weight stays true the entire way. And you can see that I'm holding it just straight, directly upright, and I'm using my posture and all of my basic fundamentals to keep a consistent needle depth there. And you can see I get clean, consistent results all the way through. This is something that you want to be mindful of, especially earlier on. You want to make sure that you get comfortable with good needle angles. You kind of want to stay away from like any sort of outlandish, awkward positions, and they really stand out. It's not something that you really have to question. Like for example, if I'm holding my machine like this or sideways, they really do stand out when we're holding our machines and angling our needles in incorrect ways. But you can see that's how I would go about it, and I keep the line weight true to the integrity here each and every step of the way. That right there is some adversities and ways that I would go about correcting bad needle angles. So here is an Inkclaw 003 round liner. I'm sorry, this is actually a bug pin 3 round liner, so it's super fine. Now, allow me to kind of demonstrate what a wrong line weight selection would look like. So let's say if I were to line this entire design with this fine of a needle configuration, this is kind of what it would look like. Now, if you're going for something like that, then by all means. But for me, I was wanting to stay true to the design integrity. You can see that this is tremendously thinner than the surrounding line weights, and that is because of the needle size that I chose. So you can see that it's real important to select a needle that's beneficial to the design at hand and to what you're wanting from the design, because that really does impact the entire tattoo. But this small of a needle configuration is exactly what I'm going to use to apply these areas right here on the mu. You can see that I'm being real precise with where I deposit the ink, and I'm able to really build up this area right here in a manner that allows me to be super accurate with the design. And then I'm going to repeat that over here, and I'm just using the very tip of the needle running at 4 volts just to build up this area right here. I'm not going for like any sort of one pass lines or anything like that. I'm just simply sculpting all of this out and applying this area as cleanly and neatly as I can. There we go. And then the same thing over here. You can see by using such a smaller needle configuration, I'm able to be tremendously more accurate with where I deposit the pigment. Now, there is also a kind of negative side effect to that. Let's say if we're not used to this small of a needle configuration, because it's really easy to be accurate with this, it's also really easy for our mistakes to show up. So for example, let's say if I was over here and I wobbled a little bit, which I'll do on purpose, you can see you're going to see those mistakes there. So what that means is with these smaller needle configurations, we have to be extremely accurate, consistent, and smooth with our deposits each and every step of the way. Like so. There you go. So you can kind of see, although it's definitely not bad, I actually love the way that that reads. When I wipe away, the line weight's going to fluctuate smaller. You can see though, this is really going to be subjective and to each their own. Every artist is going to select a different line weight. Some artists would like this line weight all the way through, while others would like the 5-round liner, while the buck pin is for the eyes. Everyone is going to be different. There is no right or wrong. However, in terms of mistakes that beginners make earlier on within their tattoo journey, are kind of non-negotiable. Style is subjective, technical application is not. That right there are some top mistakes that I've seen beginners make, and those are some ways that we can go about correcting those mistakes. Now, just a quick recap before we conclude the video is we're going to want to make sure that we're focusing on our comfortability, which means our posture and positioning each and every step of the way throughout the entire tattoo that we do, each and every tattoo that we do. We also want to kind of develop and work into a keen sense of needle depth. This is just something that we develop and work into over time. So that's something that you want to work on and develop along with your hand speed to voltage. That's just something that we gradually work and develop into. You also want to start with mid-sized needles such as an 11-round liner, maybe even a 9-round liner, especially if you're just starting out. Also focus on those needle angles. Make sure that you have healthy needle angles each and every step of the way, every single tattoo that you do for optimal results. On top of that, you also always want to focus on matching your line weights to the design, so that way you get healthy, consistent results true to the design originally agreed upon. Also make sure that you have good ink for your application at hand. Those right there are some things to focus on, and I guarantee you, once you start focusing in these areas, you will see development in these areas, which is going to make applying your tattoos a lot more easily, but you should also see cleaner results from your work. We just have to go through it and not around it to do the footwork, and we will see the improvement over time. That'll be it for this one right here. Should you have any questions at all, I'm going to encourage you to drop a comment down below, and I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I will be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do also have social medias under the same name as my YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, all under Daniel Yuck. I would appreciate the support over there as well. With that being said, I appreciate your time and I thank you for watching. You have a great day. Are you wanting to develop your tattooing skill sets? Now you can practice and develop anytime, any place with an assortment of tattooing workbooks that I've created. With these assorted tattooing workbooks, we can practice our basic lining all the way to advanced lining. We can practice shading, shading placement, dot work, textures, and more. All we are going to need is a tattoo workbook of mine. We can use a pencil, pen. We can even use a tattoo machine with a ballpoint cartridge to develop our tattooing abilities further. That means that we don't need tattoo ink, we don't need napkins or petroleum jelly to get to practicing. Simply open one of my tattooing workbooks and get going. It really is that easy. You can get your hands on one of my developmental tattooing assorted workbooks by simply clicking the links in my description or in the pinned comment section below, or navigate navigating on over to Amazon.com, typing in Daniel Yuck, and you'll see all of the assorted tattoo workbooks that I've created come up. If you have an Amazon account, be sure to follow my Amazon author page as well, as I would greatly appreciate your support. Should you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section down below. I will do my best to assist you in the best possible direction. With that being said, let's get right back into this video. Are you needing or wanting tattoo guidance? What about 4K high quality step-by-step follow-along tattoo sessions? Or maybe one-on-one tattoo support to get answers to your questions that are specifically tailored to your wants and needs as the artist? You can now become a Patreon where you will gain access to high quality 4K exclusive step-by-step follow-along tattoo sessions. I will be tattooing with you in a one-on-one step-by-step manner where I will be explaining what I am doing and why every step of the way. I will also be doing this in a high quality 4K format for your optimal viewing experience. On top of the one-on-one support and on top of the step-by-step tattoo session guidance, you will also gain access to exclusive tattoo stencils that you can download and place on your end to further develop your skill sets. I will leave a link for you in the description or in the pinned comment section below, or you can head on over to patreon.com/Daniel Yuck. When you become a Patreon, you will be getting one-on-one support where you can ask me as many questions as you'd like that are specifically tailored to your wants and needs as the artist. You will gain access to exclusive tattoo stencils that you can download and practice on your end. You'll also gain access to exclusive high quality 4K footage where I walk you through each and every tattoo session in a one-on-one step-by-step manner where I explain all the what's and whys along the way. Become a Patreon today. Thank you for your support in advance. I greatly appreciate you.